Hollywood legends who participated in this film, Constance Towers and France Nuyen. And the legendary agent Budd Moss, who really is the first cause of the film, and who was Rita's last agent. Budd? Okay, Connie, I'm going to start, while Budd is getting settled, asking you.
Number one.
You're number one. You're number one. You were at Columbia in the 50s, and we just got a little bit in the film, but I'd like to know a little more. Did you get to know Harry Cohn? What was your sense of him and of the studio? You were under contract to Columbia at the same time Rita was.
Well, not really at the same time she was. I was there when she came back.
Yes.
To film Pal Joe. So I was kind of the young actress on the lot, and hearing other people talk about she was there that day. I never saw her. I'm so sorry that I didn't have the joy and the honor of seeing her, meeting her. Would have been wonderful. You asked about Harry Cohn. Harry Cohn, to me, I was thinking, because you and I were talking another time about the difference of being under contract to a studio at that time and what it would be to today to compare the two when you really don't have a studio to be under contract to. And it was kind of wonderful then. It was simple. There was one person who was the head of the studio. He was the total authority. He made the last decision. And so there wasn't this long list of producers, and you wonder who makes a decision today, or how do they do that? It's kind of like a committee with a lot of people.
There was one person, Harry Cohn.
This was one person. Well, the 20th, it was Daryl Zanuck, and MGM, it was Louis B. Mayer. And they made the decision. They took someone like, as we see they did with Rita Hayworth, and totally redid how she looked. So they made her into another person.
And what the film doesn't really discuss is she had problems with that, and she had a lifelong struggle with Harry Cohn's domination. She couldn't wait to leave Columbia, and she made Pal Joey, which she didn't want to make, because that was her exit clause. If she made it, she could be free. So after all those years, she was finally free of Harry Cohn, and she felt liberated.
Mm-hmm. But she, in a way, I think she had to look, well, when you look at the film, you realize if you want to be a movie actress or want to be a star, a goddess, how wonderful to have someone help you do that. I mean, to find that image.
She was grateful to him and then also angry with him, both at the same time.
She was fighting this control,
yes,
which none of us want to be controlled. But being at the studio in the late 50s was being on the cusp of when the studio system was going out and this new world of film was coming in. But I remember going to the studio in the morning, as I said in the film, that it was like going to school. You got there, Maurice Stoloff, who was the head of the music department, took me to my singing lessons. He drove me to Culver City, and we talked, and it was a different intimacy. It was a different feeling.
But you were grateful for being under contract.
Oh, I loved it, but I left because I couldn't take the control, and I wanted to go out and do my own thing. And in some ways, I look back on that and think, was I rash? Did I do it too soon? Or should I have stayed and enjoyed this protection that they gave me? They controlled your publicity. They protected actors. If they made horrible mistakes, it wasn't on the cover of a National Enquirer the next day. It was somehow hidden. So it's very interesting. You look at both of it, and I do understand because I didn't like the control, and I had an experience with that. At Columbia, if you wanted to talk to Harry Cohn, you could. And they had the dial phone in that day, so you put your finger in that little circle and you would go around and you dialed 0. And you'd better have something to say when he picked up the phone. And I knew I wanted to leave, so I put my finger on the phone and I dialed 0. And the voice came on and it said, "Harry Cohn, who's this?" And I said, "It's Constance Towers, Mr. Cohn. What do you want?" And I said, "I would like to make an appointment to come and see you." "Why?" "Because I have something very important to talk to you about." So he made an appointment with me. And I went to his office, and I walked in, and he was seated in a desk that was slightly higher than I was. I mean, it was on a little platform. And he said, "Okay, Towers." And he never called you by your first name, so he was rude, he was crude, but in a way you saw who he was. There was no, I mean, he was totally honest. And he said, "Sit down." And I said, "No, I would like not to sit down, Mr. Cohn." And I said, "Sit down." I said, "I'm not going to sit, and what I have to say is very brief." And I stood in front of him and told him that I had been there for 2 years, and that I felt I had made one movie, and that I really wanted to leave because I had other plans and the things that I wanted to do, and I didn't think he had those plans for me. And he had my contract on his desk, and he thumbed through the contract, and he looked up at me and he said, "All right, I'll let you go." And I walked toward the door. I turned at the door and said, "Thank you." And he said, "Thank you for what?" And I said, "Thank you for telling me the truth. I know that if you had had plans for me, you would never have let me go. So thank you." And I walked out.
That's a wonderful scene. Very honest of you.
Well, I look back on that and I wondered, did I make the right decision? But I was lucky. And then the next year I made The Horse Soldiers with John Wayne and William Holden, so that was kind of fun.
Directed by John Ford, not too shabby.
And probably if I'd been at Columbia, he would have had the right to refuse my being loaned out to make that film to John Ford. So I don't know what would have happened, but it was an interesting experience to have that first-hand relationship with the head of the studio.
Which isn't really possible today. It's the post-studio system. Franz, I wanted to ask you something we touched on in the film, and that was Rita's transformation from Margarita Cancino to Rita Hayworth. For her to become a success, every bit of her ethnicity had to be erased. There was no sense of her being a Latin woman in her imagery. She was an American film goddess. But is that disturbing to you, to see that process of transformation? How she would herself, her ethnicity was transformed, erased into something else?
Well, I tried to write something this morning, and what came to me, having worked many years with women who were abused, children who were abused, and what happens to the psyche of a child when he's or her is being hurt and denied life in a way that other children should have. And what happens is that the child being born is faced with a new word that is the unknown. It is relying to its keeper, mother, father, as the world, the foremost authority of the world. It learns by the behavior of its caretaker what the world is about and what he is about or she is about versus the world. And what happened when the child is being hurt, violated, denied normal needs of affection and love and care and protection. There is something that happens to their, in order to survive, is denial. Denial and literally a sort of a numbness of awareness, numbness of the pain. And not understanding, not having developed because of no other experience, they haven't. It's a child learning that there is no discernment at that point. They cannot make any choice. So the child accepts the condition of his life, which is painful and fearful and anxious for the moment that they are going to be hurt. And what happened at that point is there's a form of amnesia. And even to the point where they cannot understand or feel or realize what is happening to them. They just submit. And
France, I want to follow on that. You say submit. Rita Hayworth submitted to the makeover regime that Harry Cohn gave her. Is there an interesting connection between her submission to becoming transformed into Rita Hayworth and her abuse?
But inwardly, that submission is actually glossing over the acceptance of this is the world for them. Now, what happens to a woman like Rita Hayworth, who came to great success and enormous talent and praise from all over the world, is that she found what you saw in her extraordinary beauty exposed and given and literally without fear or shame or guilt or anything. And what you see in Gilda, for example, that extraordinary sensuality and sexuality that people project as her consciousness. But it is not the person that lives outside of the ring of the cinema, of the work area. It is literally that person that has been totally suppressed through the drama and horror of her life, can at last be free to be herself. And because she's not relating to a human being, she's relating to the camera. And the camera doesn't judge, the camera doesn't demand anything of her. The camera is not going to tear her flesh apart. The camera is not going to make her cry or hit her or rape her. But she can please the camera. She can show how much love she has in her, how much life she has in her, how much extraordinary beauty, free of freedom that she has. But she is safe because the camera will not hurt her. The camera only witnesses who she is really, who she wants to be. The camera respect her power, respect her freedom to be herself at last. And unfortunately, that doesn't represent, is not mirrored in her personal life. where the timidity that is mentioned in your documentary, the shyness, is actually hiding all that thing that is suppressed in the unconscious. And it is very sad. And I hope there were time with the man that married her, who had great intelligence and sensitivity. I hope that they were able to heal some of the scars that were literally always raw in her being. And it's very sad. It's very sad that rape is not considered a crime, which I think it is. And that there is actually a murder that occurs during rape of the real human being that is coming to life.
But you knew, thank you, France, powerful. But you knew Rita well. Is what France was saying and what's depicted in the film accurate in terms of her shyness, in terms of the privacy, the difference between the image we saw on the screen and the woman you knew? You were her final agent. Tell us about your own personal interactions with her. No, but yeah.
But it's yours.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good evening. My journey with Rita Hayworth.
I don't think they can hear me.
Put your microphone closer.
Am I live now? Can you hear me?
In front of your mouth.
Thank you. Is that better?
Yes.
Everybody can hear me now?
No.
Take mine.
Is that better?
Yes.
Thank you. My journey with Rita Hayworth started many, many years ago. My father was a film editor at Fox Studios. And in 1939, 1940, there was a cast and crew screening of Blood and Sand at Fox Studios that I was able to go with my mom and dad. I sat there watching people who lived in a country called Spain, and I knew nothing about Spain. I saw a man fighting a bull and knew nothing about bullfighting. And then there was this woman who came on and just made the world feel that she knew she had the power to seduce a man, is what she did in Blood and Sand. That memory stayed with me. And I said, one day I'm going to meet Rita Hayworth. One day I'm going to go to Spain. One day I might even be a bullfighter, which I came close to doing at one time. When I was 17, my dad got me a job in the commissary at Fox Studios. I was a busboy. And one afternoon I was cleaning off the tables in section 29, and all of a sudden, down the aisle, I could see Rita Hayworth coming towards me with Daryl F. Zanuck, the most powerful man in the world and owner of Fox Studios. And I said to myself, oh God, is this the time that I'm going to introduce myself to her? Am I going to tell her that I've been a fan of hers since I was a little kid and that I loved her and maybe she could wait until I'm 21 and we can go off and get married? And all of a sudden I got hit in the head with a wet towel, and it was the maitre d' throwing a towel and saying, Moss, wake up and go and clean table 12. That was my introduction to Rita Hayworth. One day, when I was an agent in 1967, I got a call from Edward Feldman, who was the president of Warner Brothers. And he said, Bud, I understand you represent Rita Hayworth. And I sort of backpedaled because I knew her attorney and I knew her friends and all that. And I said, yes, what can I do for you? He said, this is off the record, but we're losing Joan Crawford to a film that goes in Spain next month called The Bastards. We hear terrible rumors about Rita, that she's an alcoholic, she's a drunk, she throws things at people. People come to her house for dinner and she says, "Who are you? I don't know you," and would slam the door in their face. Can you help me meet with her, give her the script, and hopefully if she's right and likes the script, I want to have her in Spain in 4 weeks. Well, my wheels started to turn, if you can imagine. Rita Hayworth going to Spain to make a movie. I'm her agent. I have to be on the plane with her. I have to go to Spain with Rita Hayworth, who I saw in Blood and Sand in Madrid when I was 11 years old. And these wheels kept turning and turning and turning. Anyhow, we met. She read the script. Her attorney spent time with her, talked to her. He said, "See, there's some of the rumors that are going around, that you're difficult and you're yelling at people and all of that." And she said, "Tell Budd Moss I want to do this film, and he has nothing to worry about." Weeks later, Ed Feldman met with her again, and before I knew it, she said, "Rita, go to makeup. We're going to leave in the next week." I woke up one morning and I was on a 747 flying to Madrid with Rita Hayworth. And this fantasy was becoming almost alive. We stayed at the Palace Hotel right there in the Plaza Argentina, and which was across the street from the Ritz Hotel and down the street from the Prado. And we had a 2-bedroom suite in this hotel to the penthouse. So I was with her morning, noon, and night. When we got off the plane in Madrid, the press was there. An agent friend of mine was there to meet her, and we took her to the studio. And all of a sudden, weeks later, days later, she started to prepare for this film. I was there with her when she walked on the stage that morning, and all the cast and crew, even up on top, all stood up and started to applaud and said, "Welcome, Rita. Welcome to Spain." From there, the shooting went exceedingly well, and Rita's birthday on the 17th of October was coming up, and the producer said, "We're going to give you the day off, Rita, to do whatever you want to do on your birthday. Happy birthday, October 17th. Knowing Toledo, Spain, I said, "Let's go there for the day and have lunch, go to the cathedral, see Greco's home, and enjoy some time together." We got there, and she finally kept saying, "Bud, this is the happiest moment of my life." It was her 50th birthday. And there was a picture of paparazzi was driving around, and he saw us, and he grabbed this picture, which today has been seen in every magazine and newspaper around the world. And we came back to the hotel. It was getting to be close to 8 o'clock. She said, "I want to rest for a little while, and then we're going to go to dinner." And I took her to a flamenco restaurant called La Corral de la Moreria in Madrid. And Rita was so excited to be at this place. They kept asking her to dance, and she danced with the flamenco dancers, and she even got on the table and started to dance there. We took her home, back to the Palace Hotel. And as we got up to the room, she said, "Rumi," which is my nickname. She said, "This was the happiest day in my life." And she leaned over and she very gently kissed me goodnight. About 3 hours later, there was a little crack in the door, and I could see a little shadow. And the door opened, and I could smell Rita's cologne. I think it was Hermès. And she sat at the end of my bed, and she said, "Rumi, I need you to hold me." And the lights faded out, and a couple hours later, it was morning, and Rita was going back to work, and that was our trip to Madrid, Spain. Foster, I've got a trip to Argentina, to Brazil, to London. I'm not quite sure how you would like me to.
No, I have a question for you.
So I said to Foster when I got here, I had an hour and a half speech, and I had to cut it down to about 5 minutes.
Our conversation will be longer than the film. But tell us how you got involved with these. Aren't they charming, the German filmmakers?
Henning.
They're so likable and charming.
Henning.
How did you get involved with them? Did they approach you?
Henning called me one day from Germany. He got my number, I was in my office, and said, Mr. Moss, I just finished your book, Hollywood. And I would encourage you, I'm remiss in saying that I didn't bring books tonight to go on sale. I thought the best way is if anybody's interested in ordering the book called Hollywood, Larry King was kind enough to do the forward on the book, and it's really enjoyable. It's about 80% Rita Hayworth. For those who have read the book, there's about 15 chapters that cover a couple of years that we shared together.
But do we get the answer in the book? What happened when you held? You left us.
I've known this beloved lady, Constance Towers, for years, and there's a time when she knows how to get to me. She just twists that little screw.
But it was your book, Hollywood, that got you the job
Henning called me and
as the
said,
executive producer of this documentary.
Yeah, he said, I'm going to make a documentary on Rita Hayworth. I read your book, Hollywood, and I would like to have you do an interview for me. And I said, well, I certainly don't mind doing an interview for you, but if you're coming all the way over from Germany to do this documentary, I said, I want to be your United States producer. And I immediately, when he said yes, he said, let's do it together. I had notified Ms. Towers. And before you knew it, we had this documentary that we put together. I mean, you've seen it tonight. I'm sure you all agree with me. It's a brilliant, brilliant piece of film. They shot in New York first with 4 or 5 people who you saw, the son of Delbert Mann. I'm trying to remember who else was there. But then when they came to Hollywood, Connie and I just did some research, and we've got the Good Shepherd Church that was Rita's church, and we had gone over there, and she did an interview. We had gone to, I rounded up all my little people. I rounded up RJ and Connie and Eddie almost, and France and Millie Perkins and Diane Baker, who unfortunately was not left in this film, which broke my heart. But we all sat together and made this film. And from there, Henning then went back to Germany.
But what's interesting is I did the off-camera interviews for most of the interviews in the film, and there was so much material that was cut that it could have been twice as long. But we all had points that we made in our interviews that are not in the film. So it's a little discouraging that the film's very tight, but we all have many more words of wisdom that we didn't get to say in the film that were cut out for all of our wonderful panelists, so that tonight is a chance to fill in the gaps. Connie, did you have an opinion about Rita Hayworth as a fellow actress?
Every time I see her or see a piece of film, I was looking at things yesterday, I'm just taken by her magic. I mean, what a wealth of warmth. And what France was saying is that the camera read that. The camera gives that to you. And I was especially touched by the moments when she's dancing with Fred Astaire. Total abandon. You think of all the other extremely incredible women that danced with Fred Astaire, and they were all wonderful. I mean, Ginger Rogers was fabulous, but they were all careful. It was like they were, when you compare her to Rita, that they were sort of in awe of Fred Astaire, which I certainly would have been too. And what did Ginger Rogers say? Somebody said he was so incredible in the way he danced, and she said, yes, but I had to do it backwards on high heels. You know. She had an abandon about her that somehow, I wonder everything, the wonderful things you said, if the camera liberated her, so that she could be totally herself, and the camera doesn't lie. And it just captured, it went right into her heart. I think she's fabulous.
And she's so generous. She reveals so much.
Generous is a wonderful
Yes,
word.
she reveals so much. There are 2 later films that nobody knows of hers that I would recommend for you to watch to see what a really good actress she is. Of course, she's a great dancer, but she was a good actress and got better later in life. She plays a waitress in a film called The Money Trap. Does anybody know that? With Glenn Ford. And she's terrific. The review in the Times said Rita Hayworth never looked less like a movie star and more like an actress. And then she has a part in a film that nobody remembers with John Wayne and Claudia Cardinal called Circus World. And she has some scenes in that film that show her range as a tragic actress. There are fabulous dramatic scenes that remain virtually unknown. Homework, Money Trap, and Circus World.
Foster,
Yes, what?
I would be remiss if I didn't take another couple minutes, and if my audience here will indulge me, to tell just 1 or 2 quick stories that I'd like to share with them. Is everybody interested?
You got one.
May I, Foster?
Yes,
May I go ahead?
you may. You have my permission.
In the audience, there is a friend of mine by the name Juan Abraham, who was from Argentina, who was responsible for bringing Rita and I down there in 1967, or close to it. They had offered a tremendous amount of money. It was sponsored by his newspaper and also by Channel 13, that starred this magnificent actress, Argentine actress by the name of Mirtha Legrand. She was known as the Rita Hayworth of Argentina. And over the years, every once in a while, she'd see a movie that Rita would do, and she said, she's doing my part. I want to redo that movie so my friends in Argentina could see. So she would make movies on the films that Rita Hayworth did. We were in Argentina, in Buenos Aires, at a time that there was a mini revolution, which we really didn't know that much about. I had asked some people who had been in touch with the State Department, and they said, well, if you're careful, nothing should happen to you. Well, we got to Buenos Aires, we got off the plane, and immediately we were surrounded by soldiers with machine guns to escort us to our limousines so nobody would attack Rita. We get in the limousines, and as we drive out, the security reached into their coats and pulled out their German Lugers, their hand grenades, their machine. They put them all on the dashboard as we started driving into Buenos Aires. We could hear the driver talking and squeaking, saying that the snipers aren't interested in firing at limousines, so you're pretty safe in getting into Buenos Aires. When we finally did, and we checked into the hotel, Savoy, I think, was the name of the hotel. We got upstairs to our suite, which was beautiful, and as Rita ran to the window to pull back the drapes, just at that moment, a bomb went off at the base of the hotel, and it exploded, and everybody was thrown to the floor, and the security jumped on Rita to protect her and on me. And they explained afterwards that there were these terrorists that were going around, and we really had nothing to worry about. We had a few more incidents in Buenos Aires, and then we left because one of Rita's longtime lovers, going back to her early days, was a man by the name of Jorge Ginley, who owned the Copacabana Beach Hotel. Jorge Ginley was known to be one of the most wicked Lotharios, if I'm pronouncing the word properly, Lothario, and you can go to your thesaurus and look it up. He was there to meet us when we got to Rio de Janeiro. And even though Rita knew all he wanted to do was to try and get her back into bed while she was there visiting, we had kind of a marvelous time sightseeing. And finally one day, Rita's assistant Judy and I went up to the top of the mountain where that magnificent cross is on top. And all of a sudden, Judy said, I think something's happened, something's gone wrong. We got to get to a phone and make sure that Jorge's still at the hotel and Rita's okay. We raced back to the hotel. We got there, Jorge was not to be found, and the security said, we think we saw her walk out onto the beach about an hour ago. And all of a sudden, Judy and I said, good God, what would happen if the mafia grabbed her, or somebody grabbed her, or I was responsible for her being kidnapped? So Judy and I spent hours walking on the beach, on the hot sand, going to every lifeguard station that was there, asking them if we saw this woman, which is a very traditional thing in Brazil, is kite flying. And there, Foster, in the center of all those kids, was Rita flying a kite. It was the most beautiful moment that I had ever seen Rita. And when all of a sudden we said, Rita, it's us. She says, what are you doing here? I'm flying these kites. And I said, well, I think it's about time we go back to the hotel. Anyhow, thank you for sharing that story. One, I like these shortcuts. I'm sorry about it, my friend.
I want everybody to stay for Lady from Shanghai, because that's extraordinary. So we have to end here. But in the interview that I conducted with Yasmin, Rita Hayworth's daughter, and I'm sorry there isn't more of her in the film, because it was an extraordinary interview. Could you see how down-to-earth the daughter was? She's very practical and an extremely devoted daughter. Extremely devoted. I'm not sure that comes through fully, and devoted to the memory of her mother and very honest about her mother. But she said something to me, and I'm sorry it isn't in the film, but I'll end our conversation here by quoting it. She said, looking at me very directly, she said, my mother had a lot of tragedy in her life, but she also had a lot of joy. And Rita Hayworth, 104 today, she brought a lot of joy to all of us, as these three legendary Hollywood figures have: Connie Towers, France Nuyen, Budd Moss. I thank you for being here.
Thank you, Foster.